It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, the mayor, the governor of Beckerville, USA, the man himself, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
Michael, how are you?
Things are going good. What's new in the Old Capital world? What's coming up?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Michael. October 24th, 25th, come to Dallas. If you are all from all points, north, south, east, and west, point the airplane to Dallas. We'd like to see you come to Dallas to meet other multifamily people. Great opportunity to network and meet some of the top, multifamily syndicators, multifamily brokers, multifamily SEC attorneys. You are going to have your whole bucket filled with a bunch of people on the October 24th, 25th. Our keynote speaker this year, again, is Coach Lou Holtz. Coach Lou Holtz coming in. Our theme is really do the right thing. When you're taking care of business, do the right thing, whether it is to your property, is it to your limited partners, is it to your lender? Just do the right thing. And so, being where we're at these days in the economy, we really want to focus in on doing the right thing for everybody that's involved in the transaction. So go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com. website, oldcapitalpodcast.com website, RSVP to that conference. We'd love to see you. If you don't have to be from Dallas or Texas, it's a national conference. So we'll have people from all over the United States come to Texas. We just happen to have it in Texas. We happen to live in Texas, but it's a conference that you probably will not recognize a lot of the faces. And that's perfect because you want to meet new people for your database. We'd love to have you there. Anything more to add to that, Michael?
So it's a great event. There'll be, 600-700 of our closest friends. And I'm personally excited to hear Coach Holt speak. He has growing up being a college football fan still to this day. I certainly watched him for many years as a coach, as well as on TV for the last 20 years on ESPN Sunday Game Day, which will be kicking off here shortly next week as we record this is the first week of football. So we're pretty excited about that.
So as you know, Michael Becker, he's purchased over 8,000 apartment units throughout the United States. They currently own about 5,800, so they've bought and sold a number of properties, $675 million of assets under management, over $1 billion worth of apartments that he's purchased. He is the man. So we asked Michael all these questions, and we're just finishing up the series of 5 different points that you need to know when you get into multifamily. Last one we talked a little bit about is closing the transaction. We talked a little bit about structuring the closing and what's important for people that are closing in these transactions, what to be aware of, whether it was attorney opinion lenders or UCCs or who's responsible for the deposits for the tenants. So this last one, again, this finishes up the series, is really, what can you expect from your lender after we close? So again, Michael, these transactions are not like single family loans where you borrow the money up front and all of a sudden you never hear from a lender again. So again, Michael, what can you expect from your lender after the loan closes?
Yeah. So, I think right after it closes, usually within a week or two, you'll get like a welcome letter, essentially, kind of giving you kind of all the proper contacts to your portfolio managers within the bank and all the various things that you need to do. They usually require you, if you haven't done it during the escrow process, to actually sign up for like an automatic debit by ACH for your mortgage payment. So usually we pick the last available date, which is usually like the 8th or the 9th of the month. And so that gives you time to collect that current month's rent before you have your mortgage payment due. So you go through that, as well as it gives you a copy of like your immediate needs and requirements. And if you have any escrowed money with the CapEx, it'll kind of reinforce what their CapEx budget is that's on deposit with the lender, and then kind of give you a amortization schedule. So your loan typically has some level of interest only on the first number of years, then it converts to amortization. So it'll kind of give you all that stuff. So that'll give you all the information as well as copies of the forms you need to submit on an annual basis, as well as the forms you submit when you go submit either a replacement reserve draw or CapEx draw to get your money back out. So you get all that good information, get you set up on their portal so you can log in and view your loan or add it to your portal if it's a second loan or more with the same lender. So that's a lot of it. And then usually on these loans, the Fannie, Freddie, and most bank loans, there's some level of quarterly reporting. So you have to give like typically a rent roll and a year-to-date financial statement. So that'll be something that you kind of report to them. And then on an annual basis, you have to give, your annual statement, as well as usually there's KP certificates. So you have to sign a certain borrower certificate that you're, not in default. You haven't filed bankruptcy, various things you got to attest to on an annual basis, as well as the one updated PFS or personal financial statement on the KPs on the deal. And sometimes they, depending on the lender you're with, a lot of these banks will have like liquidity statement requirements. You got to give them copies of your bank or broker statements, as well as some of these banks will require tax returns as well. So most of them will want the tax returns on the entity, and sometimes they'll want tax returns on the guarantors of the KPs as well. So these are all the financial covenants, basically lender covenants that they'll be spelled out in your loan agreement, and then they'll be requesting those on a quarterly or annual basis is pretty typical. So that's a lot of it. And then, making sure that, as I mentioned on the last episode, that we have like certain deadlines and timelines on the capital improvement. So making sure you guys understand that. So if you start falling behind on those, they'll start checking in on you, kind of why you're behind. Maybe we'll give you an extension to your timeline, but then start scrutinizing a little bit more if you start missing deadlines along the way. And, if you're really kind of out of compliance, and you'll get kind of on the bad boy list, and then make it harder to do future loans with Fannie or Freddie or that bank if you're not doing what you're required to do from like immediate needs or ongoing capital improvements to your property. So that's a lot of it, Paul. That's usually kind of what to expect with the lender after closing.
So what happens first on a rehab? So say you buy a property and you want to put in $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 worth of rehab, and we're able to include that into the loan. So does the bank give you the money at the beginning to do it, and then you can go out and use their money to do it? Or does the bank require you to do the work first, and then you ask for your money back from the bank? And
so it depends. Usually they want you to go and spend the money. So then when you're submitting a draw to get reimbursed after you spent the money, you got to send them a copy of the actual invoice on the work you did, as well as a copy of the canceled check showing kind of proof of payment, and they reimburse you for it. And then sometimes if it's like a large ticket item, like I got to do $300,000, $400,000 of exterior carpentry work and then paint my building. Usually these contracts have like progress payments where, maybe a third of it's due up front, and then, a third, maybe 30, 30, 30 kind of payment schedule with 10% retainage at the end. So you kind of, get a certain percentage of completion, the contractor will send you an invoice. So a lot of that, you can submit in a copy of the full contract with the initial startup payment for that first 30% to your lender who's escrowing your money, and they'll issue a co-payable check, one to the borrower and to the contractor along the way. And then before they issue the progress payment, they'll want to go inspect to make sure that, a certain percentage of the work has been actually done and completed. So you can also get some co-payable checks along the way if these are larger ticket items or just a little bit tighter on working capital. So that's what a good relationship with your asset manager or portfolio manager of the bank will help you navigate some of those cash flow issues.
Do they usually send out somebody to take a look and make sure the work is done on some of these bigger ticket items? Yeah,
they'll go through and usually inspect along the way for your capital repairs, not necessarily for your replacement reserves, but for your capital items like carpentry, paint, or big interior upgrades.
Is that somebody from, say, the bank or Fannie Mae that you have to pay them a fee to come out?
Typically a third party that is hired by your bank, then that cost of $200 or $500 or whatever in the inspection cost is passed back to you as a borrower. So maybe they'll withhold $500 from the $10,000 draw that they cut you. Maybe they only cut you $9,500 instead to pay for that vendor.
And then also too, is when you're doing a rehab, to make sure that work is done, do they require you up front to put 125% of the rehab dollars into the deal?
So usually with the immediate needs, they'll make you escrow 125% of the cost, estimated cost to do it.
And again, what are immediate needs?
So these would be immediate deferred items that maybe we should have another podcast and talk through here, because I know we got a question about that recently. But, stuff like potholes or trip hazards, like kind of like life and safety stuff, like you don't have your GFCIs or whatever. And so we can go, I can talk ad nauseum about some strategies on how to improve that process. We'll do that in another podcast. But yeah, they'll typically escrow some percentage greater than what they estimate the cost to be for margin for error. But if you say, hey, I'm going to go upgrade, 50% of my units at $6,000 a unit, they'll just typically escrow what you tell them they're going to do, because those are kind of capital improvements, not life and safety immediate needs.
So anything else that you want to add to that? Is there anything else?
No, I mean, I think just your lenders, your partner in this deal. So being a former banker, the lenders don't like surprises. So when there's good news, that's great. When there's issues, make sure you're communicating with your lender and be proactive about it, because they'll tend to work with you if you're being proactive. If you kind of try to hide the ball a little bit and then surprise them, when it comes from a small problem to a big problem, they don't like that, and they lose confidence and trust in you. So just make sure that, you're communicating along the way, and, understand what your reporting requirements are. Get a process and procedure in place to handle that. Like we talk about, when you start out, you do everything. You kind of, from chief bottle washer to CFO or the CEO of the company. But as you scale, make sure you have people and systems in place to handle that stuff on a regular, ongoing basis.
And you have seen people that have not done what they said they were going to do up front into these transactions. So loan close, people buy a property, loan closes, and then all of a sudden, you have a schedule of things that you're supposed to do, but you don't do it. And then that person goes back to the lender and says, hey, listen, I want to do another loan.
Yep.
And what happens when the lender opens up their books and figure out, well, on the first one, you didn't do what we told you to do.
Then that makes it hard to get future loans, right? So making sure you stay in good standing with your lenders is critical for future business. Because if you say, hey, I'm going to spend $500,000 in the first year, and then you're 2 years later and you haven't spent a nickel and your property looks like crap, then they're not going to believe you the next time and be less likely to give you a loan.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly true, is that you got to be very careful about that, is that if you promise something to get done and you do not do it, it will hang you up on your next deal, whether it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or even a regional bank. Because a lot of the times the banks are going to ask for, they may call, if you're a regional bank, they may call your lender and find out, how did this borrower do for you? Would you lend him money again? If that borrower has not been performing, that banker is going to say, stay away from this guy. He's not good. So it could wind up to severely putting you into a tough position, because, again, a lot of bankers do talk, and it's one of those things on the checklist when the credit committee says, have you talked with the lender, the prior lender this borrower had, and you got bad information. It's like having a negative part on the credit report.
Yep.
Not good. So some great information. Michael, if somebody wanted to know a little bit more about what you guys do in your syndication business over at SPI, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find more information is to go to my company, which is SPI Advisory. We have our website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy. Advisory.com. There's a contact us form to fill that out. I'm always happy to have a 10 or 15 minute telephone call with listeners I meet off the podcast. I want to learn more about what we do and potentially working with us in the future.
And you guys have this advisory business. Can you tell me just one success story? I know that this is a little bit different from the rest of the stuff, but tell me one recent success story on that.
We talked about the guy that went from a fourplex into 200 brand new units over a couple of transactions, but we have him, and then we certainly have another client. We're in the process where we help them buy a deal pretty early on in our career, and they've done a good job, and the market's gone absolutely crazy. It's property in Grapevine. I think they're going to make like a 7x or something like that on their money, Paul, over about a 6 or 7 year period, and
wow.
And then we're going to help them go from, $2 million to the $14 million they have in equity now, or some crazy number like that. And then we're going to help them buy, a much larger, much newer, much nicer building, which should be able to increase their actual cash flow dramatically through a 1031.
Get to know Michael. Past performance is no indication of future returns, but that is spectacular. And what they do over at SPI, make sure you reach out to Michael if you do have any indication of wanting to know a little bit more about what SPI does. So again, that was Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.